I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write about theater for the New York Times.
And I'm Peter Marks, formerly of the Washington Post, and now a theater free agent. Here we are again with another edition of Marks and Vincentelli. Elizabeth, we're keeping them coming. We're on a roll here, fast and furious.
I am completely, really impressed by our productivity. We started 2024 with a roar, and dear listeners, we have some doozies lined up. I know I said that a lot, but this time it's for real, as Donna Summers once said. It's okay. Well, but before we get to that, because we have some really amazing recording sessions scheduled. Let's start with today.
Yeah, well, today, Elizabeth, we're talking to someone who is an industry powerhouse, a theater industry a mover and shaker, and not just theater, but also in the realms of television and movies and streaming and digital.
Yeah, I think many people might not recognize his name, but he really is one of the most influential people working in theater and in TV and in movies. And I'm talking about the casting director, Bernard Telsey. So where to begin with Bernie, as his friends and podcast interviewers like us call him? Well, so I would say his first big break really came when he cast Rent, a New York Theater Workshop in the mid-90s. And he's worked steadily on Broadway and off-Broadway and on tours ever since. So many shows, I can't even begin to list them all. But there was a little one you might have heard of called Hamilton is in that list.
Right.
So Bernie also has his fingerprints pretty much all over the New York theater scene. He cast encores at City Center. He did Here We Are, the last Stephen Sondheim musical at the Shed. He, of course, has long associations with companies like the Atlantic Theater and, naturally, MCC, which he co-founded with Robert Lupone and William Cantler in 1986, and which he's still involved with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that Elizabeth and I and most theater people are obsessed with the HBO series, The Gilded Age, which also runs on Max, is the incredible array of theater actors that Bernie and his partner in casting for the show, Adam Caldwell, have managed to pull off. It's
staggering.
It's like the ultimate playbill bio collection. It's like every name is somebody you've seen in a show and loved. So just some of the names: Christine Baranski, Nathan Lane, Kelly O'Hara, Cynthia Nixon, Audra McDonald, Laura Benanti, Michael Cerveris, Celia Keenan-Bolger, John Douglas Thompson, Patrick Page, Douglas Sells, Deborah Monk. And those are just the ones written down on this paper in front of me.
The best part is every time there's a new servant popping out, you're like, wait, didn't I see her in this at the Golden Theater? There's it's just incredible. It is so much fun to watch that show. Regardless of the plot, I don't even remember what it's about. It's about New York, right? I don't know.
Yes.
Some rich people. I don't know.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah, sort of. It's that stuff. And what about screen musicals like Mean Girls and The Color Purple and Schmigadoon? Well, Bernie has worked on them too. I'm completely overwhelmed by the scope of the work of our guest today, and I have a ton of questions. So, without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Bernard Telsey. Does it rhyme like
Telsey? Yes.
Telsey. I think this could be a new SpongeBob. I'm sorry, a new meme.
Well, it's great to be here.
A new podcast meme. Okay, so can you start? How does one become a casting director? Where is there a casting director school? Were you always observant?
There isn't a school. I think more and more the younger people are wanting to go into the field as the field has become more recognized. I'm sure you saw the big announcement last week that we're now eligible for a casting Oscar for best casting, which is amazing. But I think, in the past, or at least in my generation, it was people who were at one time actors or directors who then felt like that wasn't the right place for them, and they somehow fell into casting or went into casting, which is what happened to me getting out of school.
Did you start as wanting to be an actor? Was that where it started?
Yeah, I'd gone to NYU for acting and theater management. I mean, I knew I really wanted to start a theater company, which I winded up doing. But simultaneously getting out of school, I was acting for a little bit, but I didn't like it. And one of my professors at NYU introduced me to Meg Simon and Fran Kumin, who at that time were casting all of the Manny Eisenberg and Schubert plays and August Wilson plays. And I winded up working for them as a casting assistant, and I stayed there 6.5 years because I just immediately fell in love with it. The minute I started going to the theater every night with Meg or Fran, I started acquiring a taste and seeing all these incredible actors in New York that I just was like, I think this is the right place for me.
What did you fall in love with specifically, like doing that?
Seeing what an actor was capable of doing, which was basically, as an audience member, moving me to tears, moving me to emotions that I wasn't even having normally, as a young 21-year-old, and seeing what they were capable of doing, but then getting to see them not quite do it at full blown in an audition situation, but then going to see them in a performance and seeing, oh my God. And I knew immediately, having trained as an actor in school, that was not something I could do or wanted to do, but I wanted to try to help those who do that get work. And I just was like, it was like falling in love with performances.
So what makes a great casting director or a person who casts?
That's a great question. Someone who understands what it is an actor goes through and what an actor is capable of doing. And then it's having good taste. And what is good taste? You as a casting director, you need the knowledge, right? You need to have the knowledge of who's out there. Those who are graduating from school or those who are breaking out in plays and musicals and movies and television shows. You just have to have a sense of who all the actors are. And you need to know how to find them. You need to know how to look for them. It's almost like being a really good detective. You know what I mean? In that sense of trying to figure out who am I going to go after at this particular time, or who am I going to go try to find. I think those are all some of the qualities. But it's about having really good taste and then knowing how to talk to actors and how to talk to creative team members, because you're part of this amorphous collaboration. At a time when people are very nervous about making those final decisions.
Interesting.
So another thing I always say, it's like being a great host of a party, and you're trying to take care of all of the different people who are at your dinner party.
Oh, that's great.
Because they're all coming to that dinner party with different points of view and but yet, you've got to have the right food and the right timing, when to bring up the subject and when to move on to the next course. And so much of casting is that, because you're the one hosting that audition process.
So I'm curious, like where do you, like, speaking of process, like when do you intervene in the process? Like, because for instance, clearly it's different if you're working on a new show or on a revival. Like if you're working on a new show, like how much do you know of the play or the musical? Like, and how closely do you work with the director, for instance?
Oh, very. In both. I think in all of the mediums, even film and TV, but mostly theater, we're almost like the first people hired, outside of the creative team. I don't even mean the creative team, the collaborators who are actually writing or directing. We're that first person who is called up by the director or the producer to say, come join our party and help us find the actors that are going to take this down 1 year or 5 years. And we then try to get inside as much as we possibly can from those writers and the director about what they're thinking. Sometimes there's a script and a score. Sometimes there's 3 songs. Sometimes there's just an outline. You know, I mean, but whatever it is, we try to spend sort of quality time with the writers and the directors about what is it that you have imagined, what is it that you are dreaming of, and how can we get whatever information you have so we can start to suggest people who might be on the right path or might be a new inspiration that they weren't thinking of. You know what I mean? Like, you describe the character as this, but could it be this? And you start to collaborate with the people, and that's the thrill, because you're helping not necessarily create, but you're helping find the element that is what they all need next, which is actors.
That's so interesting, Bernie. MCC Theater, your theater, the one that you founded with Robert Lupone, the late Robert Lupone, has an event every year, a benefit called Miscast. And obviously, that's a word that has deep meaning to both critics and casting directors. But do you believe in miscasting? Is there such a thing as somebody being miscast?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I mean, I think
I disagree. This is great.
No, because I think from a critic standpoint, right, you might not have liked that person. Why does that mean that they were miscast? You know what I mean? Like, to be honest, it's a taste business. So what you think, your interpretation of that role is different than who might have actually been cast. I think the benefit is it's a slogan, it's a title, just to show you that they're playing roles that they normally wouldn't get cast in, as opposed to miscast, right? I mean, that I think became the catchier phrase 25 years ago for the benefit purposes only. But in the real sense, who's to say that person is miscast? You know what I mean? Because your interpretation of Willy Loman is different than Arthur Miller's or different than whoever's directing that particular production. So I try not to use that in the casting process.
Yes, but for instance, if, let's say, a singer is cast in a part for which their range is not right, like, wouldn't that person... I have a specific example in mind. I'm not sure I want to get into...
yeah, let's not do that.
But like, someone who's kind of straining to hit,
Sure.
Like, wouldn't you say that's miscast? If that, like, isn't like the basic requirement for a musical, or...
Yeah, I would hope that someone on that creative team was not thinking that, was thinking that they were right for what they were trying to do, but they didn't fulfill what you thought they should fulfill. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, yes,
Well,
it gets to become semantics. I mean, it just feels like it's an easy word to use rather than say, I didn't like her because she couldn't sing the song the way I believe it needs to be sung. It was easy to say she's miscast.
It's interesting, Bernie, to think about, the public perception of miscast. We'll move on to other things, but I'm just curious, when somebody from a major publication identifies someone as miscast, and I try not to use that term because I've learned over time that it's a judgment about a part of the job, I think, of being a critic that I'm not sure I feel most comfortable making that call. But the question is, do you get blowback from a producer, say, or from someone when that is happening? They say, you see, Bernie, that was a bad call. Do you ever feel like you have to justify a casting decision that you still believe in that may have been controversial or may not have gone over? It wasn't successful.
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time. I mean, and the director is doing that as well. I mean, obviously, there are many times we work on shows and you didn't have a 100% consensus of everyone who has a sign-off. There will always be those, who are less excited about making that final decision. And then if they didn't come off well in production, they will say, see, I told you. You know what I mean? So those discussions happen all the time, but I still think it's not about miscast necessarily as it is about I liked them, I didn't like them.
Right.
You know what I mean, kind of a thing.
I mean, this is kind of related, but I'm interested in the idea of like typecasting and casting against type. So casting against type, I feel, has been very much in favor because it kind of makes the creative team look edgy. We're stretching, we're redefining the material.
The imagination.
But I think that sometimes there's a reason that people get typecast because they're really good at something. And the example I want to use here is the recent production of Once Upon a Mattress at City Center, part of Encore's, which had Sutton Foster as Princess Fred, kind of rambunctious, very physical clown role almost. And Michael Urie as Prince Dauntless. And you would think on paper, they're perfect for the roles. And as it turns out, they were. And Harriet Harris as the queen, sounds perfect. Well, she was.
Right.
And so in those cases, I'm like, I think sometimes there's a fear of giving people what they want. And also probably from the actors that they don't want to be stuck in a box. Because Sutton Foster is going straight into Mrs. Lovett, which for many is not an association that they would make necessarily. So what's your take on that? Like in terms of like typecasting and casting, have you had moments where you really had that leap of faith of casting against type and you felt really rewarded by the risk? I think here we can name names because that's a positive example.
Yeah, no, but I think the example you're giving, it's also okay to be spot right on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, in one sense, to use Sutton, applaud her as an artist, that she's doing something that might be right in her pocket, and then she's doing something that, like, I don't always get seen as, and I don't always get cast as, but I want to play this role, and I can play this role, and I'm good at it. You know what I mean? So, like, both times, it's exciting, and I think, again, typecast, miscast, all words I don't love using, but there's no reason why you can't cast something or cast someone who's right in the pocket. Because, look how it was so rewarding to you. And yes, it was really easy to have those lists and have those conversations. And the director, Lear, to go, yeah, I want Harriet. Yeah, I want Sutton. Yeah, I want Michael. They're perfectly cast. You know what I mean? In that sense.
Well, I want to take you back, Bernie, to what I consider one of the great casting coups in Broadway history, off-Broadway history, and it was where I met you. It's where I got to know Bernard Telsey and think, okay, this guy knows his SHI blank. And that was Rent way back in 1995, 96.
Yeah.
Six.
Yeah.
I wonder, that was an entire cast of unknowns. Nobody knew a single name in that show. Nobody knew the composer of that show. Nobody really knew the director of that show. How did you go about assembling a cast that, in retrospect, is considered kind of a classically, perfectly cast show, made stars of half a dozen people or more, and really changed Broadway, even when it obviously started at New York Theater Workshop? Can you take us through what that was like, finding those people and feeling that confident that they could carry off these what became huge roles?
Yeah, it was. I say this when people ask. It's still the most rewarding, the most exciting, and the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Because one, even though I had been casting for a few years, doing regional theater and plays, I really hadn't dabbled in the musical world. I had done this rock opera for John Adams and called I Was Looking at the Ceiling and Then I Saw the Sky.
Never heard of it.
And it was and it was supposed to, they talked about it being this rock opera of young multicultural folks, and that's how New York Theater Workshop thought of me to come do the Rent project. But what made that so specific is, thank you, Jonathan Larson and Michael Greif and Tim Wilde, the musical supervisor. Jonathan knew he wanted voices that he had not seen on Broadway. He wanted rock and pop voices. And, you hear those things in the beginning and you're like, yeah. You mean just like Les Mis with a little bit of edge. And, and he was like so specific, and he knew, because it wasn't like today, there's a rock pop show every other day. They weren't happening then. There was no market for that. It was all of the Andrew Lloyd Webber type shows. And of course I said, yes, I want to work on that. Sure. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And, it was also at a time where there wasn't off-Broadway musicals. Nobody, like you said, knew who any of those people were. And nobody wanted to do it. I couldn't get an agent to pay attention to it, because why would they have a client work for $200 a week when they could be in the ensemble of one of the 5 tours of Les Mis? You know what I mean? Whereas now, even though that is still the option, people understand that these off-Broadway shows and these musicals can really create careers.
Interesting.
And there's a whole world of this now. But there wasn't then. So nobody wanted to do it. And I didn't realize that until I started, when the agents would tell me to go, no way. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it was just, and then the other thing is, because they had planned for it, they started a year out. They had said, Jonathan will see anyone you want him to see.
Wow.
And he will spend his time with you. And Michael Greif, who was running the La Jolla Playhouse, will come in once a month to see who you guys liked. And every day, Jonathan came to my office with Tim Weil, and we would do auditions. And after seeing anyone that might have been submitted, it was okay, now I'm going to have to do detective work.
Wow.
I didn't know where the hell we were going to find these people, and whether it was, going after all the things we do now naturally, but going after, Latin organizations to try to find an angel, or going after, rock clubs to try to find a Roger. I mean, it was just so hard. And what was also great was Jonathan and Michael, at least what they always said was, we don't care the makeup of this show. We will create the ethnicity once we find the great voice. Collins was written as a white guy. You know what I mean? And we couldn't find a white guy to play Roger. Now you want 2, one for Roger and one for Collins, who have a rock voice. But it was through the casting process that we were like, well, what happens if he's like George Benson instead?
Oh, interesting.
George, you know what I mean? And let's see an African-American guy, which is how we got down to Jesse, Martin. But each one of those roles were endless. I mean, the only easy thing was Anthony Rapp, who was set from the beginning. He had done the readings at the New York Theater Workshop, so he was locked in. But I mean, we found Adam Pascal 3 days before rehearsal started. I mean, it was just so hard and so exciting too, when you would find someone like Idina Menzel walk in the room, or Wilson Heredia walk in the room, who had no credits whatsoever, and you were like, yes, done. You know what I mean? It was just wild, each specific role.
I seem to remember at the time that Adam Pascal really came more from a rock background, and I feel like the borders between rock and musical theater were a lot stronger at the time. No, because I seem to remember that he himself was like, I'm not a musical theater guy, I'm a rock guy, I'm just doing this for now.
If we went after the rock world, they laughed at us. Musical theater off-Broadway, what are you, crazy?
Right.
I'm going to go play in, Long Island somewhere. And we, how we found Adam Pascal is we sort of had to do a little white lie. We put an ad at the back of the Village Voice and said, looking for rock and roll singers. And, show up at my office from 3 to 5 on this Friday. And this is when I had a really tiny waiting room that maybe should fit 10 people. And at 10, we went in the back room, and there was 50 guys who looked like Alice Cooper and Adam Pascal. I mean, and it was I was like, oh my God. It was like winning lotto. It was like, if only he can sing, maybe this is what we need. And then he came in, and he sang his song on guitar, couldn't read music or anything. It was sang this amazing song with his eyes closed. I mean, but those were the days. I remember calling Jim Nicola, and I was like, got one. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Yeah. Let's all do this.
Yeah,
what I mean? And
Jim Nicola was the artistic director, obviously, of New York Theater Workshop.
New York Theater Workshop.
So that leads me to a question, Bernie. is there, in the movies, there's this eureka thing. There's this mystique of like, when we see things where people like unknowns are trying out for a role in so many movies, the kind of the trope is boom, bingo, we got it. Is that feeling really produced in the audition room? Are there times when you absolutely go, oh my God, this is it, stop, we're done here?
Oh yeah. And it's so great. Again, that's the thrill that you wait for at every audition. That one time when you can get the 12 people you're hosting this meal for to all go, done. That's what happens every time Annaleigh Ashford walks in the room. Even before she was, even before she was Annaleigh Ashford, she'd walk in the room, whether it was like for one line for Michael Patrick King's Sex and the City movie or 3 lines for Jonathan Demme's movie, she'd just walk in and you'd be like, done. I have to work with that person because she just brought all that stuff that you and I all know about her now. She'd bring that into 3 lines before she was even who she was. But you live for those moments in auditions when your whole creative team is like, got it. Carrie Butler walking in for Hairspray after seeing all these young girls try to do this Penny Pingleton, 60s kind of thing. And, the day Carrie walked in, it was like, done.
Wow.
So those are great moments.
I bet.
Have you had instances where you really had that very strong feeling about someone and you had to talk the rest of the creative team into them? Like where it was like they were just not, and you felt so strongly for whatever reason. Maybe they thought it was not the right person for that particular, but you had a gut. Like, how much does the gut feeling play? Because again, a lot rides on that.
Yeah, I never want to be. It's a great question. I never want to be the person's like convincing someone, right? Because I get from day one, we're here to serve the vision of that director or that writer. Like it's their baby, it's their project. So it's not about like who's right, as it is about. I also understand everyone is fearful of making that final decision because then it's, like you say, oh my God, that's what I'm showing the world. And is it the right decision? So I understand, it's like deciding should I not get married, right? Like it's all of that kind of, everything is at stake. So it's less about convincing them or trying to get more inside of what is their hesitation or what is it that they don't know about that person that is missing that maybe I can share because I've seen them in this show or that audition or this you know what I mean? That how can I help if I'm feeling like what you said in my gut, this is the right person. This is who I think it should be. But again, they have to feel that way. You're never going to win if you're convincing somebody.
Well, I'm really curious, the stakes, Bernie, the difference between 1996 and 2024 in terms of the stakes for things like a Broadway production, a Broadway musical, even a Broadway play are so much higher given the costs and the investment and the risk. I wondered, has that changed the process at all of selecting the people for a show? Is there more pressure now to find someone who can sell tickets, for example? Is that really play a bigger role in the process than it did, when you had shows in the 90s and even the early 2000s?
Yes. I think there was always the star casting, but it does feel like everybody needs to be more convinced that this will be able to sell tickets beyond just being a great show or something that was just well cast. So all of those conversations, even down to the non-star vehicle project, it's wanting someone that might have been on this television show or has something that people will know who they are, even if the general public isn't buying a ticket because, the daughter was on Modern Family. But, I'm just trying to, you know what I mean?
Right,
but yet, it still means a lot in some circles.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It gets a press release. It gets social media. So there is a sense of wanting to make sure every stone is covered, beyond just whether or not they're perfect for the role. So because it is a business, and I understand that, which is why we even have to work harder to try to be on top of who sings, who can, who can't.
I assume this extends to the nonprofit world as well. I mean, theaters even that are not commercially produced. Does that also mean you have to be more involved, more acutely aware of popular culture? Who's on streaming? Who's on TV? You have to be watching all this stuff?
It's a much bigger encyclopedia. Yes, or I have people on the staff, who follow TikTok, who follow streaming, who follow television shows, who are following the internet. You know what I mean? It's just so much more. It's so much more than just finding the right talent for the role now, because it is a business. You know what I mean? Even in the television world and in the movie world, it's who else can we get? So we're constantly, and luckily we've done a lot of movie musicals, so we have a sense of some people that we wouldn't normally know sing because they went after this movie. So now we could try to get them to, come for a show. But it's a much wider net. And now internationally too. I mean, that's the great thing with the internet. We can see actors in Australia, in England, and, wherever. So we're constantly trying to stay on top of it, and you never feel like you are because there's so many actors out there, so many wonderful people out there.
Actually, that's kind of touches on something I wanted to talk about, which is, basically what you're talking about here is the pipeline, how you find these actors and also how are they trained or shaped, and I feel since the mid-90s, there's been I would say for some actors, not all, but for many of them, there's been a real professionalization, I think, with excellent, schools, whether it's Northwestern or Michigan or, Juilliard has been there for a while, but, and I feel that I'm seeing a lot of, I'm going to say it, you don't have to say it, but I feel like I'm seeing a lot of very professional, technically professional actors that often lack a little something, they can hit every note and I'm still left thinking, So how do you find that? How do you figure out when someone has that special extra sauce, I would say?
You just got to keep seeing them and seeing them and seeing them. That's the great thing of to be able to be in so many auditions like we are. You're seeing people, even if they don't get that role, you're getting to see them do what they do in auditions. And that gives us a sense of, oh, she or he or they have the sauce. You know what I mean? Because we saw them in there. You know what I mean? The myth of there's only, everyone who didn't get the job was bad is not true.
Right.
There's, I say this to young actors all the time. You're in an industry that is about, your job is to not get hired. You can't go to this many auditions or job interviews and get them. Right. So, I never think of it as good or bad as, they just didn't get cast in this part. But, oh my God, she has the sauce that you're talking about. And then you run out of your office and you tell the 9 other casting directors in your office, make sure you see her for so-and-so, because I heard you haven't been able to cast that part in Hamilton, Beth. So you should see her for your replacements because we just saw her for, such and such, and she's amazing. That is so exciting, you know what I mean? Or you go see them in a million roles like you have when you both are seeing them in productions, then you start to say, oh, she or he or they have the sauce, because, you've seen it now.
Do you feel that some people auditioning is really fraught, it's really hard, and I think some people just, maybe it's not where they're good at.
Yeah, I know.
So how do you deal with that? How do you get do you look at other stuff? But these are very young, maybe they get nervous and they kind of mess up the audition. Do you also, is it another gut instinct thing where you're maybe that audition wasn't great, but maybe there's something?
Yeah, if it's a young actor that if we've seen them a few times, then we can tell that was just a bad audition. Again, it's not they're a bad actor. You know what I mean? It was just a bad audition. And sometimes that's our job to try to say that to the director or writer or producer that we're casting for, because, they don't see the people like we do as often as we do. So to them, they're bad or they're not right. And then if we really believe in them or we really feel like they can do it, we do try to bring them back or ask the team to see them again. Or sometimes you can't, you know what I mean? Like, it just didn't work out for this time, but maybe we can try to give that feedback for the next time.
I want to ask you, Bernie, about the difference for casting in for film or for television. I think, and this is not something you have to respond to particularly, but I think that for the Gilded Age, I think the casting is better than the writing.
Yes.
And that's not something you have to respond to or comment on. For me, the delight of that show is how meticulously you have found the talent that I have always loved and appreciated in other venues and put them all together in this incredible ensemble week after week. People who I've loved on stages tiny and big, and watching them get to express themselves in this on this platform is so rewarding. Obviously, for a theater person, a theater lover, I can go through the names. So my question to you is, you're using. It feels like Bernie Telsey and his staff are operating with the encyclopedic knowledge of another form and bringing all that to a streaming series that ordinarily that anyone else, possibly with the exception of a couple of other people, could not have cast this with this kind of dexterity. Do you feel like you got to do something with Gilded Age that you rarely get to do in terms of the pool of people that you put in that show? Because it feels like an act of love, frankly.
You nailed it on every level. Yes, and kudos to Adam Caldwell, who's the other casting director of that show, with me in my office. But I think it started with Michael Engler, who was the showrunner and a director I've worked with in the theater, and he's also the director of the show, who said, I want a troupe of actors. And I've been developing this piece with Julian Fellows, and already you're going to read a script and it's going to look like 6 leads and everyone else. They're all leads, and they're all going to be, whether it's episode 13 or season 2 or season 3. And they pitched it that way, that they wanted, their Shakespeare company, their repertoire company. And how can we pitch it that way? And to their credit, they budgeted it that way. So something on paper that might look like, a nothing role, at least they're not going to pay it like a nothing role. And we'll work around their theater. They just said everything right, which is how we got all those people. And then we were able to, like they said, bring in your favorite New York actors.
It's so
once
great.
we got past the Cynthia and Christine and Carrie, which were normal, traditional, I mean, still they wanted theater people.
I get it.
Yeah.
But after that, it was just like, bring in your favorite people and we'll try different roles. And here we have 7 women that normally would be all up for the same one part. We need 7 of them.
It's so good.
You know what I mean? Like, I remember Michael saying, so like, we don't just need one. So we got, we got Deb and Kristen and Kelly and Donna. And it was like,
It's
a thrill.
Right.
Right.
It's great because you have many society women to cast, and then you have even more like servants working, toiling away, and each one, and then you're like, oh my God, was that Amber Gray? Was that Amber Gray in that shack?
And it was so fun to go, and then you sit around and you go like, is she upstairs or is she downstairs? You know what I mean? It's like, well, maybe she's both. You know what I mean? Let's read it for both. And, they all came in to read for Michael and Julian in the beginning. And again, it was such a joy. And for them to be treated like series regulars and, and have this ensemble. And then they all were like seeing each other every day. And it was like, it was just, the only hard thing is it just makes you realize how many more people who are like, hello, why am I not on the show?
Oh no.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And you're like, oh, fuck, yes, I know. But so, you feel horrible, but it's such a thrill.
What's interesting too is that it plays off two things that usually don't work together. Like one is that they are perfectly in character, so they are acting the character, but at the same time, us as viewer, we have that moment of like, oh, it's Amber Gray, it's Nathan Lane. So we see the stars, but they're still in character, because very often I feel like, especially when someone is very well known, it can be a little hard to kind of pull away from that. And actually, I was wondering about that. Do you think sometimes it can be an obstacle if someone is so well known that it becomes hard to, or?
Yeah, sometimes that happens. Yeah. Like it's, yes. I just want to go back to Gilded Age for 1 second. Kudos to, there are so many actors in that show, but I love that there's so many who come from the musical theater as well.
Right.
Specifically. And that has just been, I don't want to say a special sauce of ours, in the sense of I love musical theater actors, and I feel like they are not always given the shot at non-musical projects.
Right.
And it was such an easy symbiotic match, because doing all those musicals, they're so used to having to make quick choices all the time from their days of ensemble learning. And they just did all those period musicals that they just step into the Gilded Age so easily. And I just love that Julian and Michael respond to so much of that. And it just reminds you that we're not all who are always typecast as, to go back to the beginning, Elizabeth, right? It's like, just because they're always in musicals doesn't mean they don't have this.
Yeah.
And for them to be seen this way is a total, I love it.
Yeah, I get such pleasure at. I love the scenes around tables where there are 4 or 5 of these actors. Christine Nielsen in a German accent talking to grouchy Deborah Monk. And there's just you know what I mean? It's like all these memories of all these performances fill me up from the past.
That we all saw. I know.
And I hear you about this. I think you have to explain this to me maybe a little better. There was a time years ago I interviewed Kevin Kline, and he told me that he left off his resume all his musical theater because he felt like that was not going to get him parts in movies. It was just he thought that would silo him, and I wonder if you think that is not as true today. That there is more fluidity between musical and non-musical theater. It is not necessarily. I feel somehow that there is more understanding of the specificity of an actor's talents that don't necessarily fall into categories that preclude other things.
Yes, there's more. There's totally more. Some of it is because we've all progressed, and because thank you television, in the sense of, in the last 10 years there's been so much television that you needed to open up your doors to more options for actors. You know what I mean? Because everybody was not available, so it forced casting and people to have to look outside the box, or have to look outside what they normally were doing. So who else is there? And I think that has helped.
And I think, and going along with that, I think we should talk about this a little bit, that also it feels like audiences are more sophisticated about the fact that you don't need everything to be gendered the right way, or the right way, or the traditional way, or even in terms of ethnic identity. We seem to be more accepting, more understanding. Maybe this is, in a slow evolution, but I think that casting has really been in the forefront of that effort.
Oh, yeah. It's why not to go back to the benefit, it's like why we almost go, I don't know if we could say miscast anymore, because I feel like, look, we saw a female Bobby.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right.
She did Tevye at miscast. She's probably going to do Tevye soon somewhere. You know, I mean,
ooh,
too soon, too soon.
Too soon. But yes, I feel like the world is progressed and the audiences have progressed.
It's interesting because even the terms have changed. Like I think in the 70s and 80s and even like early 90s, like people talked about like non-traditional casting or colorblind casting. And I feel like that's not even used that much anymore. Now it's just casting.
Correct.
And it's just, I think the emphasis, the words that people tend to go for are like inclusivity or diversity.
Yeah.
But this idea of traditional or, I'm doing air quotes, but like colorblind casting seems to, do you feel like it's kind of receded? Like it's just not used anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we try not to do that. We might say something like, it wasn't traditionally cast that way, but now we're going to do it this way. You know what I mean? It's much more, everybody is much more open, or at least willing to have the conversation about opening to different ways.
Can we talk just for a minute? We probably should let you go in a few minutes, Bernie, but I just wanted to ask you about MCC Theater, which you run off Broadway, which at the moment has a musical, a very ambitious musical called The Connector, about a case of a journalist who, with misguided ethics, to say the least, by Jason Robert Brown, music by Jason Robert Brown. But I just wanted to ask you, how much has your artistic directorship been affected by your role as a casting director? Has it given you different ideas about how you want to present your shows, what kinds of shows you want to do, and do you look now towards the people that you're casting in other things in other places as resources that you ordinarily wouldn't have even considered had you not had this other access point?
Yeah, I mean, that's great too. I feel like they both sort of wash each other's hands because they're two things that I do all day long, right? So they can't help but, I've cast a million shows for Jason that had nothing to do with MCC. You get to be friendly. He gets to say, I have a new musical. Do you want to read it? Maybe you want to consider it. Like those things are always happening just by the nature of, because I'm working on something, I get to know that artist or that collaborator and then see if it's the right fit at the theater. And then constantly through the casting process, you meet artists that you love, and then you're like, oh, I want them on my stage,
right,
so I could see them 50 nights, not just one night. You know what I mean? And you're constantly, there's like a overflow of how they're cast or I get to know someone who's in a show at MCC, and because I saw them 50 times instead of just once, like the way you both go or I go see something else, then I'm like, oh my God, they are really amazing. How do I put them on the Gilded Age? Or how do I put them on? And that's just because I'm exposed to it. So you're constantly working together that way. It's great when that happens. It's when it happens naturally like that.
Okay, I'm sorry. We had said we're not going to name names, but I do want you to name some names. I want to and to be positive, I want to talk about some people, just wrap up with some people that you're just so happy that you found, people where you felt so vindicated.
Yeah, I don't know if it's vindicated
that
or found.
doesn't mean the others are not good,
no, I
but
know.
Some that feel
no, it's those moments
to you.
when you feel like you helped introduce.
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And not to go back to Rent, but Jesse L. Martin is somebody I knew because I was also casting commercials at that time. Trying to make a living as a casting director. I was casting a lot of commercials, and Jesse was someone we just kept booking all the time. He was in my office all the time. He just had a manager at the time, and he was not doing, and then I got to know him and then put him in a play at Hartford Stage. And then I knew from just a little commercial that he could sing. I remember when he had to just do that as a thing, and, trying to schedule him to come in for Rent. And if you look back at our old schedules, there's 7 of them where it's Jesse L. Martin, no show. Jesse L. Martin, no show. Just didn't. And I literally drove up to Hartford Stage and I was like, please come in. I don't do musicals. This isn't a musical. I promise you, it's not a musical. And it was so hard to convince him. And I could tell this story because he tells it. You know what I mean? And then he came in and, they created the part of Collins, which forever has been written and now performed by someone like him. And, his career took off.
Right.
And so that is, to use your word, vindication only because he gave me such a hard time.
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
And now he is very, a close friend and, all of that. But otherwise, it's just, you're so happy. I mean, I said Annaleigh Ashford before. You're so happy when you meet someone like her who is in the ensemble of Legally Blonde and you could just see her popping in a small role. And then you just feel like, I have to introduce her to everyone I can. And then you introduce her to Sex and the City and she comes in and she nails this improv. And then Michael has to hire her. Or then, Masters of Sex, which we were casting, has to hire her. And then she gets her first series regular job. So it's just exciting. It's not ownership at all. It's just, there's so many good people out there that you feel like, our job is to try to introduce them to the people who get to say yes.
Well, you're like a fixer for us. You're like supplying the drug because we then take your thoughts and hopefully turn them, turn that again, like for an Annaleigh Ashford or a Jesse L. Martin, and we say, the find. We've, this person needs to be.
That's your job, right?
But it's hand in hand. It really comes from where you start. We pick it up in the best circumstances.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what's the funnest thing about the job and getting to work with directors who really cherish the casting process and use the casting process to have those discoveries. You know what I mean? And that's a thrill.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're thrilled to talk to you. And you're one of those guests, Bernie. We could, literally, I can feel us sort of like salivating to talk for another 40 minutes.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Well, it's
We could
really fun.
we could go down the Gilded Age, like cast like one by one for like
I know.
16 hours.
We're such geeks. We're such geeks.
I love it. We
Yeah.
start March 18th. We start casting again, season 3.
Oh my God.
So-
to be a fly
Well,
on the
I know.
wall in that casting session.
Well, if there's parts for a Gilded Age version of drama podcasters, we're ready. We will come in and
We'll play the gossips. We'll play the
Exactly.
malicious
Yes,
gossips.
we will.
You could be the gossip.
At some
we will-
rags, since there were so many at the time.
Yeah, we'll make Christine and Carrie, even more viciously competitive. But anyway, so thank you so much,
All
Bernie.
right, thank you.
That was really, really, really fun. As I said to Bernie, we could talk about this subject over and over and over, and it's especially interesting to us, Elizabeth, because really we are kind of frustrated casting directors in our own way.
Totally. I mean, who has not played like rotisserie casting?
Exactly.
I mean, we all have.
Rotisserie casting.
I've got to say, though, we have to stop inviting classy acts who refuse to spill the beans because this is not, we're not going to get into the millions of subscribers that we so richly deserve
true.
if we keep inviting people who are just nice and elegant and are not bitching about the stuff we want to hear about. Like, seriously, what?
You want to hear about the casting decisions that failed, you're saying?
Yeah. Like, we want to talk about, like, the superstars who completely flunked, like, where you hired a name, and then in the first week of rehearsals, you realize they're a total disaster.
Who's going to go on record saying that?
Nobody will. That's impossible.
It's the same kind of taboo as, we practice all kinds of very polite services to the rest of the people in our profession. So, there's a real difficulty in getting that kind of dirt. So, you're right. That mission is going to be unfulfilled.
I think we have to invite like 85-year-olds who have nothing to lose.
And get them drunk. Yeah, exactly.
Get them right. They're pitching a memoir and they're ready to rock.
Right.
Ready to rock. That's who we
Well,
need to get on the
unfortunately,
show.
Elaine Stritch is no longer with us. So
She would have
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah, but this was a good one, Elizabeth. We always say we love talking to actors, but today I do think we exposed our listeners to a part of the business that we all really want to hear more about.
So true. So true. Okay, so we have to keep the streak of top-notch episodes going. That one was a banger. Is that not what you say? That was a banger. What, like, our greatest hits of bangers is just getting longer. Like, it's like the longest Spotify playlist ever. Mm-hmm. The Marks and Vincentelli bangers. Is that not what you listen to at the gym? Like, it keeps me going. All right. Well, until next time, I am and will remain Elizabeth Vincentelli.
I certainly hope so. And I'm Peter Marks. You can subscribe to Marks and Vincentelli, and we hope you will.
Yes, please.
On this link, marksvincentelli.substack.com.
And you can easily find us on social media because we use our real names. So just look up for us. I'm on X and Threads, and Peter is on Thread. And we love excellent positive feedback. We thrive on positive reinforcement. So send it. Keep it coming. All right. We'll see you next time.